Bryant University played 8 conference football games in 2025, and when they did, they only got a victory in 1 of those games. Considering they compete in the FCS, they're the type of Division I program that most people didn't even know exists. You probably couldn't tell me where they are on the map, and you definitely can't tell me their mascot. For the record, the answers are Rhode Island and the Bulldogs. Bryant wasn't just not an FCS playoff team. They had never made the FCS playoffs for the entire time they've competed at that level, and it started all the way back in 2008. Yet somehow during that exact same season, the Bulldogs made history because they beat an FBS opponent. It was the 6th time they had actually tried, and apparently the 6th time was a charm. And in case you didn't actually catch the upset, the team they beat were the UMass Minutemen, a program that is well documented for not being particularly good at the FBS level. But they are in the FBS. And when the game started, everything was going according to plan, because UMass was up 20 to 3 points. That's a 17-point deficit that the Bryant Bulldogs had to overcome. And well, spoiler alert, after throwing the ball over the top a few times, they were able to not only take the lead, but eventually lead a drive that got them a field goal at the buzzer to win the game. 27 to 26. The upset, those are the facts. The real question is, how exactly did we get here? Because, to be clear, FBS programs aren't supposed to lose to FCS teams at all. And you're definitely not supposed to lose to one like the Bryant Bulldogs. Because when they moved up to the FCS, they were doing it as a playoff team from Division II. But that was all the way back in 2008. An entirely different world, pre-transfer portal, NIL, none of that actually happened. When they finally got to the FCS, they still weren't good. I mean, yeah, they had some winning seasons. Remember, they're not making the playoffs. In 2025, the year where they finally beat UMass, when I say they still weren't a good team, I ain't lying. Just look at their record. There are 3 wins at the end of the season, and we already know that UMass is one of them, and another came from a conference opponent. That would be UAlbany, but there's 3 wins. And if you're wondering if it was just a non-conference FCS team that they would actually beat, that's not what happened. Bentley University, which actually competes in the Northeast 10 Conference. Definitely not to be confused with the NEC. And they're above average at that level, but they ain't great. They didn't even make the Division II playoffs in 2025. And they flattened them, which certainly proves there are actually levels to this thing we call college football. But what exactly are those levels? Because when Bryant is playing at their level, they're not winning almost at all. Because for the 2024 and 2025 seasons, Bryant was a member of the CAA Conference for football. They only had 1 win across those 2 seasons. And yes, I already told you about it. That means they were winless in 2024. That is the program that goes to UMass and gets a victory. When the UMass game starts, remember, Bryant is the away team. Everything's going according to plan for the most part. Because UMass scores a touchdown, then they score another touchdown. Interestingly enough, they don't get the extra point. So it's 13-0. Then you get a field goal and another touchdown. The field goal goes to Bryant and the touchdown goes to UMass. That's how you get the 20-3 score. At that moment, Bryant somehow starts figuring out how to move the ball because they score before halftime, then score again. At which point, you now have a close game. Like UMass realizes, we actually have to play. Because when they were up 20-3, it felt like the game was already over because it was supposed to be over. You are in the FBS, with however many scholarships they're actually allowing now. And FCS teams not only don't have the money, they're not supposed to have the talent to play with you. And when you actually dig deep into the numbers, you find out that Bryant didn't even just escape with the victory. They had more total yards and more first downs than UMass throughout the entire game. You already know they outscored them in the second half. The same program that really couldn't go out there and beat just about anybody else in the FCS. Again, except 1 game. But this is the reality we're living in. Simply put, if Bryant had walked into this game and somehow UMass had just turned the ball over, like we're talking about, pick six, a fumble, something like that, you could easily explain it as UMass, just not executing. Essentially they beat themselves. The numbers tell a different story. UMass was just not good at all, even when they were playing Bryant. And even when they were ahead late in the game, 26-24, they found a way to mess it up. Because the only thing they had to do was get a few defensive stops. They couldn't pull it off. Bryant was able to move the ball into field goal range. And no disrespect, we're talking about FCS level kickers. Normally, field goal range is not the same thing as what you're expecting in the FBS. But that missed point after attempt that UMass had all the way back in the first half, you don't really think much of it at the moment when you're up 20-3. But now, that is exactly why the game doesn't go to overtime. It's how Bryant gets the victory. But if you're new here, I want to say thank you for even making it this far into the video. My name is Rob, and if you really want an unfiltered perspective on college football, the type that actually helps you to see it clearly, then you are in the right place. And if anything that I say actually connects with you, it is always greatly appreciated if you would please like and subscribe. But if I don't, just let me know in the comment section because I try to read them all. You can focus on whatever components you want. Not getting defensive stops, missing the extra point, not scoring the ball for the most part at all in the second half. All of these are reasons. But now the question starts to come up about what's actually happened in college football. Because you already know that Bryant is not some FCS playoff team. Not even close. They're actually the opposite of good in their conference. So on the surface, it does seem like the story is that UMass is just a really bad football team. There's a lot of documentation on this platform about how bad UMass football actually is. They've been bad for a while, but there's a larger conversation because UMass is just one program, perhaps even a test case for what's really going on right now in the FBS and the FCS. UMass was actually good at one point in the FCS. Then they moved up, and when they did, they struggled, one, with just scheduling as an independent. They were at one point in the Mid-American Conference, left it, became independent, and then rejoined it essentially in 2025 or right around that window. And when you look at the losses, that 1-point loss to Bryant is actually the closest loss that UMass had the entire season. They also had some incredibly big blowouts in conference, playing teams like Kent State, which aren't even good. And you still lose 42-6. UMass is bad, but they're not the only bad program. Think about it. As bad as UMass might have been heading into 2025, they still got invited to rejoin the MAC conference. What does that say about the MAC conference in Division I? Because FCS and FBS, there's a whole lot more overlap than anybody cares to admit. And it gets exposed in games like this. It is one thing when you are a Montana or a Montana State with a Nevada or Oregon State on your schedule. Teams that aren't particularly good in the FBS, you march in there and you might get a victory. People got used to seeing North Dakota State play against real programs and give them a game, potentially even get the victory. They almost beat Colorado before moving up to the FBS themselves. FCS programs that beat FBS teams normally feel like they could play at that level. But when you travel down, the FBS, especially when you think of it as power versus group of five, in the group of five, you have a mixed bag. And about half of those programs in the non-power conferences could probably swap out with FCS teams and nobody would really notice. Again, no shade. We're just being honest. The question is, how does it happen when FBS has all these provisions, all these allocations, and, well, guess what? Right now, the FBS has started to get pretty permissible about who gets to move in. Essentially, if you pay the entry fee, even if your program isn't all that special at the FCS level, kind of like a Kennesaw State, you can get in if you can find a conference that regionally and logistically finds a need for you. When you think about these gateway conferences, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The Conference USA, the Mid-American, dare I even say the Sun Belt. The Mountain West to a lesser degree, because North Dakota State came in as a titan from the FCS. All of it puts you in a place where you're technically FBS, you compete against, at least in non-conference, maybe a few games where you're brought in as a cupcake for someone else, but overall, you may not be all that much better than what's happening in the FCS. Bryant exposes this because they are a below-average FCS team by all estimations. When they played UMass, they didn't secretly turn into a better team. UMass was just not good. But how do we evaluate it if a winless team in the FBS is perhaps at the same level or even worse than a almost winless team out of the FCS? See where we're going with this. Theoretically speaking, when you move up in the levels, the football is supposed to get better. Bentley was a Division II program who really couldn't play with Bryant when they matched up. I mean, they tried, but the game went left pretty quickly. You would assume Division II, FCS, that's the way the script is supposed to go. And then when they reach up to the Mid-American, which takes a lot of hits from the FCS, you're starting to figure that out when you keep on digging. whether it's in Eastern Michigan, Kent State, or in this case, UMass, who's coming back to the MAC. All of these programs can lose if they don't play their cards right. Not only can they actually did to FCS opponents. This is not just about UMass being bad and whether they belong in the FBS. I think that conversation is already being had, and we don't need to have it now. But there are definitely teams in the FBS. For that matter, there are definitely conferences that are nowhere near what people want to pretend they are. Just because the allocations of what you can spend are one thing, it doesn't mean everybody's actually spending that money. And I'm now going to say the quiet part out loud, because if you made it this far into the video, I already know you're a real one. In the context of this new NIL model, where players are expected to make money and recruiting is much more expensive than it's ever been, there's a very real problem with this when you realize that the players haven't changed. What I mean by that is the exact same talent pool that existed for recruiting 10 years ago is roughly the same talent pool now. There's only a few difference makers actually out there in high school for you to go get. Yes, we have a transfer portal which reshuffles the deck, but overall, the players are the same players. You have your 5 stars, your 4 stars, your 3 stars, and your 2 stars. And every time you go down, there's more people at that level than there were at the prior. That means there's way more 2-star recruits than there actually are 3 stars. See what I'm saying? When you tell programs to spend money, and the best ones now go out there and spend more than they ever have, what they can essentially do is hoard even more talent than what they used to. The NCAA scholarship model, the one that we've seen for football that just got upended in the most recent, House settlement, that scholarship model was primarily created because there was a point historically where the best programs were just grabbing all of the talent because they had scholarships and resources to give out. So when you got down to, okay, there's 85, FBS scholarships and so on and so forth, it was actually putting a cap on who could hoard all the talent. Now, even when you have a scholarship limit, when you throw NIL in, athletes are far more likely to go to a program that's going to give them money compared to one that won't. The talent can't spread out anywhere near as well as it would, specifically from the top. So now you have programs that are kind of pressured to spend money for players who just aren't worth it. And just because you're in the FBS doesn't mean that you belong there. Just because your team is in the FBS, or for that matter, even your conference, still doesn't mean that you belong there. So these games now get very uncomfortable when an FCS opponent goes in to play against someone from the FBS. Because we know that if you're at that level, all of the NIL money and the exchanging of hands, that's just not really going down there. Some of the programs, specifically some of the conferences, have entirely sworn off of NIL. The Ivy League, the Patriot League, they're basically trying to avoid it entirely, at least in-house. These teams, if they're playing against you, and the game isn't even just close, you potentially lose. How did that actually work between you, your athletic department, and your donors, when you now have to look them in the eye because you gave money out to players who maybe just weren't as good as you hoped that they were? And the amount of talent you had access to was never really going to change anyway. We were just giving out more money because that's what we were supposed to do. Division I football is redefining itself, and these upsets are highly unlikely to happen from the power conference programs if they bring in someone from a lower level. But when you get to the group of 5, I think we're about to see a shift where the deck of cards isn't even just more shuffled. We don't know what we're about to get when these two teams face off. Because if you are an FCS program, the transfer portal actually gives these players even more incentive to ball out, because they're essentially auditioning for a program that's just a level ahead of them while they're on the field. And if you're a coach and you're watching your players get beat over the top over and over again, you might start to think, maybe I should have these other guys who clearly aren't getting the resources that we have here at a UMass or wherever else and bring them to my team. Because if Montana State walks into anywhere in the nation and win the game, especially against a group of 5, that doesn't teach us much. But when Bryant University, who can barely get a win in their conference, they do it to an FBS team, we just learned that the college football world that we thought we were in may not actually be the truth. Because the labels FBS and FCS mean a whole lot when you're looking at your balance sheets. But they don't really seem to mean much of anything when all those players actually hit the field. If you actually made it all the way to the end of this video, I do have to admit that thank you doesn't do it justice anymore, because you are a real one. If you have any reaction at all to something that I said, I do invite you to sound off in the comments. I don't always get to respond to everything, but I do the absolute best that I can to read them all. If nothing else, and you really just want to see more content like this, it is always greatly appreciated if you would please like and subscribe.